In the interest of time, since we have quite a lot to cover, I'm just going to start real quick with announcements. So it's really great to see everybody today. We have a full house. We have 45 people, I think, signed up for our fall boot camp. So it's really great to see everybody. My name is Josette Ferrer, and I'm the president of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of FEI. We are welcoming not just folks in the Bay Area, but folks from across the country. So I think if I was looking at the list right, we've got people from Wisconsin, Washington, Colorado, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and there are probably a couple of other states that I've forgotten. So it's great to see everybody virtually. Thank you to the people on the East Coast for hanging out with us late. So everyone can get to know each other a little bit more. Go ahead and put your name, title, and company in the chat just to say hi to everybody. As I had mentioned in the email that we sent a couple of hours ago, we'll have the bootcamp website ready. And in that, we'll have everybody's LinkedIn, profile link so you guys can easily connect with each other. But in advance of doing that, just go ahead and pop, all that information in the chat just so you can all get to know each other. Okay, so moving on to a couple of quick announcements. So today's session is going to focus on legal and law issues, the first of 5 sessions. So next week, we are covering fundraising and capital structure. Quick note about that session. That one ends a half hour or later. We have so much to cover for that one. So keep that in mind for scheduling. And then the following weeks, we're doing financial management. That covers accounting, audit, tax, and treasury. Glenn, who many of you met when you popped in, will be doing the strategic planning and FP&A session on the 2nd of October, and leadership and managing talent will be happening as our last session on October 9th. So lots to look forward to. And then for folks in the Bay Area, we are having an in-person event on October 30th. So we call it our Engage the Experts event, and many of the bootcamp instructors will be there to engage with you guys on a one-on-one basis about the various topics that they covered. So really fun, interactive session. This is just the snip of today's agenda. It's similar to the one that I had sent probably 2 or 3 hours ago. We have a pretty full session planned. So the meat of it really starts here where, Kent and Sandy are going to be going through general considerations, legal blind spots, interaction between CFOs and general counsel. And then Lori is going to cover corporate governance and business law. We're going to do a breakout group discussion. Hopefully you guys got the PDF of the case studies that we're going to walk through, short case studies. We're going to take a break. So if folks need to, go do stuff, grab a bite to eat or something, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then cover employment law. Krista's going to do that. And then we'll have one more breakout group discussion to cover case studies after that. So a pretty full session today, but hopefully it'll be interesting. And the time does go by very quickly. And then real quickly, I just want to make sure that folks are aware of the events that are coming up here in the Bay Area. We've got our South of San Francisco local pod social coming up in San Mateo on October 1st. And then a special event on the 10th, a screening of the documentary Show Her the Money, which focuses on women founders getting funding. And in addition to showing the film, we're going to have a panel discussion, and then there'll be networking at the end. So that should be a really fun event. We are collaborating with FEI Silicon Valley, Wells Fargo, Google, and How Women Lead and How Women Invest for that event. So that should be a great one. And then, as I had mentioned, on the 30th of October, we've got the Engage the Experts event. And just prior to that, we have our Women's Affinity Group meeting. We are relaunching that as well. So first couple of events there in October just to be aware of. The other thing to make you guys aware of, Bob Miller is on. Bob leads our Career Services group. That's a group for folks who are in transition, or if you're thinking about looking at your next opportunity. I'm going to put in the chat after I finish talking Bob's email address, and that group is open to non-members, so you don't have to be a member to join that group. And then 2 other quick things. If you'd like to join us at our events, there is a trial membership that is available where you can join for 6 months, check out all these events, and see if you like the chapter. So I'm going to put that link in the chat for the trial membership application. And then the other things too, if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, that's really a good place to see all the different events that we have going. And then you can check out our chapter homepage as well. So I'll stick all that stuff in the chat after I finish talking. And then I want to make sure that I thank our strategic partners. We would not be able to do what we do without them. So you'll meet a lot of the folks who are our partners. So Robert Half, Baker Tilly, Wells Fargo, CBRE, Aon, JP Morgan, Insperity, and BMO. And also a huge thank you to our bootcamp programs committee. Again, you'll be meeting many of these folks since they led the planning or will be speaking at our various bootcamp sessions. So thank you all to everybody. And then a little bit of bootcamp housekeeping just to make sure that hopefully everybody got the 2 emails that we sent this morning. If not, check your spam and make sure you allow emails from my email address as well as Delite's, which is the chapter admin FEI email. And if you have any questions or problems with polling or other things, you can email Delite and she'll be able to help you out with that stuff. In the email that we sent earlier today, we had included a PDF of the case studies for today. In case you didn't pick that up, I'm also going to put that in the chat. So you guys will want to grab that before we go into the case studies. So you'll have that for reference in your breakout groups. And then the link that you use today, you're going to use that Zoom link for the next couple of sessions. So be sure to keep that handy. And then as I had mentioned before, we will be sending details on the bootcamp directory, the website directory. So that will have everything for the session. So slides, handouts, video recordings, resource lists, the list of all of your fellow boot campers and LinkedIn links so you guys can easily connect. And then finally, the last thing that I'm going to put in the chat is a survey for today. So if you guys can take 5, maybe 3 minutes to fill out the survey, it's great for us to make sure that we can continue to improve our sessions. And then we are doing a raffle. So everybody who fills out a survey is eligible for a Starbucks gift card. So that's helped to improve our survey response rate. And then finally, in terms of just the meeting for today, if you can stay on mute unless you're speaking, that would be great. That helps to eliminate, background noise. If you have questions during the presentations, just use the chat and we'll monitor the chat. And then folks who need CPE credit, there are 11 polling questions. So you have to answer all of the polling questions to get full credit. You'll get your certificate in about 4 to 5 weeks. And if you have any problems with answering questions, if for some reason it doesn't look like your answer went through, then definitely contact Delite. So that's the scoop. I'm going to put all that stuff in the chat. And then as I'm doing that, one of the things that we like to do for folks who want to do it, give you a chance to know your fellow boot campers. So right now, I'm going to call on Nicole. Nicole, I'm going to take the slides down. So I'm going to pick on Nicole first and then Colin to do intros. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Nicole, where are you? Let's see. There you are. Okay, Nicole.
Great.
I'll let you and go for it.
So I have to set the bar.
Yeah, no pressure. No, and I think
Okay. My name is Nicole Olson. I'm with the company, a large agricultural company in central Wisconsin called Wysocki Family Farms. I'm the EVP of Finance and IT. And I believe people ask what we farm, and I think our mission talks about what we do the best. We believe in the legacy of family farms and our role in feeding the world. We are tier 1 supplier of potatoes to Frito-Lay and McCain's. So most likely if you eat a bag of potato chips from Frito-Lay, you could be eating our potatoes. So my superpower is I think I'm really great at solving problems specifically to like IT. I really pair finance and IT and other operations well, and I get problems and I'm like, okay, here's how we can fix it and draw it out and implement.
Okay. Well, that's great, Nicole. So if anybody has any IT issues, you can ping Nicole.
Turn it off and turn it on.
Or kick it, right? Something like that. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate you joining us again. This is your second boot camp, right, Nicole? Very cool. All right. Okay. And then I get to pick on Colin. Colin, where are you? There's so many squares. There you are.
Hiding on the second screen.
There you go. I'm going to spotlight you. Okay. You're up.
Hi. Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be participating today, and it's nice to meet everyone. I just recently joined FEI about a month ago, and Josette has done such a fantastic job welcoming me in, and I don't know how she finds the time to send out all the wonderful emails and detailed emails and help coordinate all these events. So Josette, I just wanted to thank you, and I think you do such a fantastic job.
And Colin,
And I'm really looking forward.
I got to give props to the committee, right? So
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
sure.
there's tons of people involved. Since you welcomed me in the beginning, you've been wonderful, and everyone. I'm starting to recognize some faces here on the Zoom as I've got to participate in more events and get to know folks. It's been a great organization. But I've been working in the real estate finance and investment industries for the last 20 plus years. Most recently, I worked at a company called Redwood Trust, which is based out of Marin up here in the North Bay of San Francisco. They're a mortgage REIT that invests in housing credit, both residential loans and loans on multifamily properties. I served there, like I said, as the chief accounting officer and did a rotation as CFO as well. Thinking about my superpower, it's not dissimilar, to the prior one, which was, really being a problem solver. I did want to initially say it was some technical accounting because in our industry we deal with financial instruments, and I've seen every single type of financial instrument you can imagine, including structured products and dealing with consolidation and VIEs, a lot of technical accounting type stuff. But I met a few folks on the breakout room, and as we're talking, I realized there's probably a lot of people that are technical accountants and super experts, but I do love problem solving and really process improvement and using technology to drive automation and efficiencies. And so that's something I worked on recently at Redwood with an ERP implementation, and I have been trying to get smart on AI, which I think is really going to revolutionize our finance and accounting industries. And was fortunate to attend the FEI event last night, which was really great. So
Right.
good to meet everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it. Okay. So now just moving on to the main part of the agenda, let me just pull up the slide, which has information on all of our wonderful speakers and panel today. So Kent, Sani, Krista, and Lori, they are back again, return presenters. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. They're going to each introduce themselves as part of their respective sessions, but these are your instructors for today. Give me 1 second. Okay. And then we had to do a couple of the polling questions to get these out of the way. So, so then the first question here, I know that everybody had filled out the information on kind of the list of what we wanted in the application, but this also helps folks in the room as well to know who's here and all that good stuff. So give me 1 second just to set up the polling questions, and then we'll answer the polling questions. All right, sorry, a little bit of a glitch here. So we've got this question, and then we have 2 questions next, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kent and Sani. Okay, can you guys see that question now?
Yeah.
You should be able to answer it. There we go. So what is your current job title or most recent title within transition? CFO, finance, accounting, controller, CEO, COO operations, or other. All right, we're going to close the poll in about 3 seconds. So get those answers in. If you need CPE credit, closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in the poll. And just real quickly, sharing the results. So lots of folks involved in finance. Got quite a few CFOs in the room as well. So this is kind of what your class looks like. You'll get a chance to meet folks in the various breakout rooms, but it's good to kind of have a high level sense for who's in the room, and hopefully this helps folks who are attending as well. Okay.
Just that we can't see the
Yeah.
results.
You can't see the results? Oh, let's see.
I can see them.
I can
Yeah,
see it.
Oh,
I
it's
s-
a personal problem.
Ah, Glenn, it's you.
It is me.
It is you. Another window, maybe? Maybe it disappeared into another window, Glenn.
I can see it as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good to know. All right. And so we've got 2 more questions. So really, this is going to help the speakers with respect to how much background and experience folks have in the area of legal stuff. So 2 questions, if you can answer both of them at the same time. In case both questions don't open up, you might need to increase, your window size. So does your company have a GC or chief legal officer? Yes or no? And then how much time do you currently interact with your GC, chief legal officer, outside counsel per week? So more than 8 hours, between 5 to 8 hours, between 1 to 4 hours, or no interaction. Sandy and Kent, hopefully this will help your discussion, which is coming up next, right? All right, closing the poll in 3 seconds. So get those answers in. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. Can you guys see that, hopefully? All right. So 48% of the folks have a GC or chief legal officer, so not quite 50%. And then it really looks like the interaction is really minimal. So 40% no interaction and 52% between 1 to 4 hours. So I think there's a lot to cover. So I am going to stop sharing, and teed up next, we have Kent and Sandy, who are going to cover legal blind spots kind of at a high level and talking about the relationship and dynamics between CFOs and GCs outside counsel. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Kent, Sandy, turn it over to you and I'll spotlight you guys.
Fantastic. Really appreciate it, Josette. Pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon, as always. I am Kent Chambliss. I am currently a managing director with the consulting firm Riveron in our internal management group. And that's a relatively recent segment of our business that we've carved out of essentially like a restructuring business. We recognized that there was some need there in the market to bifurcate or differentiate that service. So that's what I'm currently performing. I'm currently the CFO of a food manufacturing company just south of Chicago. And I think one of the things that is critical for me, and I'll let Sandy introduce herself in a minute, but the role and responsibility of the CFO is that of one that is constantly evolving. I'd say that, when you look at the CFO's office and what the function and mystique of the CFO was probably 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the CFO's office was typically treated much like an ivory tower. The CFO was a bit of a Wizard of Oz and brought all the information together and then produced financial information to share internally and externally. But that is evolving. I think what I'm observing today, and I like it, is that the CFO role is less of that of a wizard, of a jack of all trades, but more of a strategical partner to the business. And so that means a partner to the CEO. That means a partner to the commercial, and then as well the commercial officer. But then as well, it's absolutely critical in today's environment of high litigation and highly litigious society, that you create that connection point and have frequent touch points with your in-house counsel. And so, Sandy, I turn it to you. Is that, to me, that's absolutely critical, and that evolution and the connectivity and really having your thumb on the pulse of the business is really critical from a functional CFO perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Kent. I completely agree. Let me introduce myself briefly. I am a fractional general counsel to typically small and mid-sized companies. These companies may not have a general counsel or a legal department, and it allows me to jump in and help as a generalist. I was a CLO, Chief Legal Officer of Validant, which is a consulting firm in the life sciences space. And I started my career as a litigator and an employment defense litigator. So I've kind of seen it all. And I completely agree that it is very critical today to really be in communication, in constant communication with other leadership, especially your general counsel, or if not general counsel, outside counsel, because it's so important to catch spot issues and address problems in the early stages rather than let them fester and become a bigger problem. And that kind of sounds obvious, but when you are in the position of CFO, there's so many things going on. You may not really recognize an issue. And so that's what I really like about this program, because it is about issue spotting. No one's going to have all the answers, but when you have rapport with your general counsel, in-house legal, it's easy to just have a conversation, ask questions. And that's always what I sort of strive for in my work as general counsel, is to really have an open door policy. No issue is too small or insignificant. And I really think that in terms of communication and collaboration, it's really important, because when you're aligned and you have the business interests, you both are on the same page, it just makes for easier day-to-day management, and you're ultimately protecting the company's interests. So the bottom line is always protected as well when you take that approach.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Sandy. And one of the things that I think is, it's to me, being flexible and fluid in terms of your schedule. I know that there are certain things that every day we've got to get done, but being flexible and fluid with regard to those cultivation of relationships and building rapport with other C-suite executives is critical. Like, there's many times in what I'm doing that, I'll have the CEO pop into my office and say, "Hey, Kent, you got a minute?" And my answer is always yes. So I would say to treat all C-suite executives with that same amount of flexibility. I know that if you're on a call, then you're on a call, but just being approachable and sociable. Going out for a cup of coffee to discuss personal matters. Get to know that person more on a personal level, and understand their background and experiences. I would say that as you've migrated and moved to the CFO level, you're very comparable in tenure with someone who's in that chief legal officer level or in-house counsel. And so you've both got war stories that you can share and have a laugh over. But just creating that connection is absolutely critical in making sure that you're staying connected with regard to issues that could negatively impact the company.
I completely agree. And when I see that the majority of the attendees here meet with their legal counsel maybe 1 to 4 hours a week, I don't automatically think that's bad. Maybe, in my mind, maybe that's like a weekly check-in, which I highly recommend, like something that's on the calendar.
Sure.
Because that does help to build that rapport, kind of know what, the other person is doing. And like I said, just, being aligned on business goals and just having that whole context of the business Because it's hard. Sometimes when you're doing the day-to-day stuff, you get really, tangled in the weeds, and it's nice to have those kind of checkpoints. So what I just encourage is to just have that open communication with your legal.
Definitely.
Sandy, Kent, any other recommendations? We can turn it over to Lori, I guess, next.
No, I think we've covered the key points. Just be flexible, be approachable, set up those frequent touch points weekly or bi-weekly, at least monthly, I think is critical. And it's a joint effort. In the CFO's position, you've got responsibility over treasury, FP&A, financial reporting. If you're a public company, you have those exposures related to 8K filings and other disclosures. And so being lockstep with your general counsel is absolutely critical.
Got it. And maybe one
One
question.
thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to underscore what Kent mentioned earlier, and it's just that being strategic. And I think it's really similar to the general counsel position, that it doesn't cut it anymore to just be, very skilled in your particular field. When you're in-house, you really have to have that strategic mindset and be able to work with the business people, collaborate with people from other leadership positions as well as non-leadership. And the other thing I was going to say is, I think documenting everything that you do is really critical. I feel like I, always mention that in my role when an issue is presented to me. I always underscore documentation, and anyone who has worked with me will probably attest to that. Josette, what's your question?
So there are many folks in the room that aren't yet CFOs, right? So in their day-to-day duties, if they're CAOs, controllers, maybe VPs of finance, they don't maybe normally have to have interactions with, their GC. What would you suggest for those folks that if it's not like in their, role, how do they start getting up to speed on, some of these other issues that maybe they're not seeing on a day-to-day basis, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about my own experience, I feel like it's really organic. It depends. Like I said, my approach is to have an open door approach. And anyone could reach out to me, and they knew it. And when my company started growing and I had a larger legal team, maybe that meant reaching out to someone on my team. But I would, and if you're not sure, if you're at a company and you're not quite sure how it all works, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to legal. I think they really appreciate it. I mean, no one's going to say, oh, why are you, reaching out to me? Because it is, it's just lockstep with the idea of protecting the company. And so I think, hopefully you have a legal department or team that is approachable, but if not, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out. Now, if you don't have in-house legal, that's, a little bit different. But I would be familiar with what the process is, and I wouldn't be shy about it, because like I said, it's always easier to spot issues and ask the questions early than deal with issues that become really big problems.
Got it. Okay. That's good.
Totally
input,
agree.
Sandy. Okay, great. Okay, so I think we are ready for Lori. So I'm going to remove the spotlight from Sandy and Kent. And Lori, are you there? Where are you? Okay. Lori, we can't hear you. I know Lori was having some technical difficulties, so let's see. I think we lost Lori. You know what we can do, Lori, if you continue to have some technical difficulties, is Krista on? Maybe we can
Sure, I'm happy to jump
to
in.
Krista. Let's give maybe Lori one more minute. I think it's one of those things where, IT. Otherwise, then we can change up the agenda a little bit. Krista, if we can do your employment stuff, maybe those employment breakout group questions, and then hopefully Lori's stuff will start working. Lori, are you good? Let's see. You got to take it off mute. No, not good. Okay. So Lori, what we can do, we'll have Krista go, and then if you're able to dial in by phone, we can grab the slides and then can just walk through the slides. And if you can present, you can present by phone and then we can present here, then I think we're good. Okay, so we'll pivot a little bit. Krista, floor is yours. So if you can
All right,
go, let's see.
are we
Well, five-
doing
Yeah, if you can go till 5:10. That seems-
slides? You want me to?
Yeah, pull up the slides.
There we
Sorry,
go.
got to pivot here, guys.
All right. Can everyone see the slides?
Yeah.
All right, and sometimes just if you want to see other people instead of just the slides, you can always do that gallery split view and put the slides on the left and see the rest of us on the right. So I hope that's helpful. Well, nice to meet everyone. I'm Krista Mitzel. I am an employment defense attorney. So I represent companies when they get sued by their workers, but our firm is different in the sense that we try to do things right to help you not get sued. So we try to take a proactive, preventative, business savvy approach to really help companies do the right thing, because we find, communication, an ounce of prevention really goes a long way. So that's our take. And Sandy's already introduced herself, but our goal today is to really walk through some of the hot button issues that are going on. But our first polling question is really about, have any of you experienced any issues in the last year? So Josette, you want to put up our question asking everyone if they've experienced any employment questions? And we asked in the last year, but I'd be really curious to just see how many of you have actually gone through an employment issue. So let us know. Check all of that apply, I believe, or can they only check one?
They can check more than one. Yeah.
Oh,
we
yeah.
have it. Yeah.
I'm
so-
just curious, how many of you have actually gone through any of these issues at your company or prior companies? It's always a really stressful one. And I have a lot of clients who will come in and say, I've never been sued before. What happened? So it's good to know how jaded you all are.
Uh-oh. Jaded or experienced, maybe?
Well, you have to sit with us for 3 hours, so I'll be your comic relief.
I think that was Rich Weissman's duty. Sorry, Rich, I don't mean to pick on you. All right, so let's give it another 5 seconds. So get those answers in. You can pick more than one. Closing the poll in 5 seconds. So closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll, and Krista's sharing the results. So
Oh, interesting. We've got
yeah.
a lot of interesting things here. So discrimination, harassment, retaliation are pretty common. The pay complaints, just internal complaints, performance challenges. All right, so you're quite an experienced group. If you feel like sharing the other in the chat, please feel free to do so. If not, we'll just keep going. But it's good to know that you've got some experience under your. Oh, and none is even better, Roy. You're our sparkly unicorn that you haven't had anything bad happen to you. So congratulations.
That's a good point. We got to add that in for next time, right?
I know, exactly. That's a good one. We just assume everyone's had a bad experience, but we shouldn't. We need to be positive. So in general, the first place to start, compliance, that ounce of prevention can really help you. And typically, I will say this, CFOs oftentimes have HR lumped under them. How many of you have HR under your umbrella? You can sparkle finger me or raise your hand, but it's interesting because I bet none of you are HR experts, are you? And yet you're overseeing this function. So it can be quite stressful. So if you don't have an in-house HR person, it's really good to lean on an outside expert or your counsel to make sure you really have guidance on these things. But some things you just want to keep an eye to and looking over on a yearly, if not bi-yearly basis, would be making sure you have the right onboarding documents. Lots of changes have happened in how we bring people on, the kinds of agreements that need to be in writing, what you want employees to sign. So really starting there is going to be your first line of defense, and making sure you get the right people in the door. So make sure you really think through who are the right people, because that's kind of like your number one risk reduction strategy. And then thinking through, handbooks, policies, fair pay is a big issue. If you've all heard about the different lawsuits going on about making sure employees are all paid fairly, and you're looking over wages every year to make sure everyone's been trued up and the same categories of workers are being paid fairly, especially after a merger or any sort of growth spurt. And then thinking about how you pay people, that's still one of the biggest, most expensive hot button issues. You know, we had 3 clients sued in the last 10 days on wage and hour issues. So really ensuring that you pay everyone correctly is very important. And then thinking through various agreements, we'll talk about it later, but just as a high level, arbitration agreements are very common in professional settings, but there are certain carve-outs you have to have, allowing certain types of claims that can be arbitrated and others that can't. And also non-solicitation and non-compete agreements, if you're in California, are in mostly all cases unenforceable. So if you still have old agreements that have these kinds of provisions in them, it could put those agreements at jeopardy. So really be careful about having a yearly review of all of your documents. Make sure all your commission plans are in writing, bonus agreements. Make sure you've really thought through what's the possible way I'll get sued here. And I like to joke that, you know, I assume all of your employees are going to sue you. I even assume you are all going to sue your companies. Because if you think that way, it's a bit cynical, but it will make you act differently and it will make you think differently about the end goal, because it's really hard to prevent something when you haven't thought about it. So really think about what's the worst possible thing that could happen, and then make sure you've really thought through how to put that in writing. I had a client who had to pay out a commission indefinitely to an employee who just quit because the commission agreement wasn't structured to say that once you are no longer an employee, you no longer get those commissions. So just really be careful about how you write things and how you set things up. And then I always like to say, you know, love them on the way out. Really make sure that you treat people gracefully as you exit them, whether they exit voluntarily or involuntarily. It really affects your company culture. It affects the people leaving and how they'll go onto Glassdoor and speak about you, but it also affects the team that you have remaining. So never underestimate what changes or rifts or departures can do to the team that remains. So Sandy, anything else to think about before, you know, that big insurance question, but we'll kind of get to that as well.
No, I think that covers it. I was just thinking that with the non-compete, my advice was I love the way you worded it, because I would always say it's generally unenforceable, but business people seem to, you know, want to know what the loophole is, or really, or, you know, like it's always hard to convince them. Yes, especially in California, you don't want to rely on a non-compete. So
You don't. So this is what you have to do. You have to be more savvy about what information you let what people access and how you let them access it. So it all comes down to how you manage your team, how you manage the information flow, who has access to what, how you protect your intellectual property, right? It's like Coke, not letting everyone have all the parts of the recipe, right? So you have to really think about who needs this information and should I share it in whole or in part, and really being savvy about how you do that. Because again, anyone can leave your employee anytime. And if they have all of their contacts that they've become best drinking buddies with in their cell phone, there's not much you can do about it when half of your clients leave and go to this new company. So just think through all those worst case scenarios, right? And again, Lori put a good point in there that, again, one of the main loopholes is around, you know, partners separating, and there are more, you know, constraints you can put on that. So we wanted to kind of get a, you know, tabulation of how everyone's working these days. I know we're a little bit farther out from COVID, but it still seems there's been a lot of high drama around work models. So let us know what your office is like right now, just so we get an idea of how everyone's working.
Yeah, Krista, it's interesting. You know, we had gone kind of virtual with boot camp, you know, during the pandemic. So we've kind of seen these answers evolve, you know, over time.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of drama recently because there'll be another poll question coming up. But a lot of clients have had some big drama about returning to the workplace. So I don't know if you're part of that contingent, but it's been a huge issue. So, all right, Josette, what do we have here?
All right, so we've got, not surprising,
Hybrid. Okay. And, you know, 7% back in the office. And that's very common of the Bay Area. Are all of you California based? I don't know if we did the geography question yet, but mostly California or across the country?
I think 75% California, 25% across the country.
Okay, good. Well, California, especially the Bay Area, is still highly hybrid, but there has been a shift toward moving back. And I have several clients with long-term plans to, within the next 1 to 3 years, get clients completely back in the office. So really thinking about how that's going to evolve is going to be interesting. It's also interesting to think about how you manage and train people and onboard people. So really thinking about all of those things is going to be important for you. And I just want you to have a lot of these things on the radar. I mean, we talked about compliance concerns, but these are some of those really big issues that come up. And, you know, we have a polling question coming up about what affects everyone most frequently. But if you had to think about kind of where you have your biggest concerns, does anyone want to unmute and share kind of if you had one thing that's keeping you up at night on the employment front with your people, what would you say is something that's really, you know, your biggest challenge? Anyone want to be brave? Come on, it's happy hour.
I'll jump in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go, Lori. It
So-
works.
Yeah. Managing across multiple generations is a big issue with professional services firms, I think.
Yes, you know, Laura, you're hitting a nail on the head. Last month, I did a seminar with a few other professionals on this, and it's become really interesting because every generation wants to be paid differently, motivated differently, communicated with differently, given feedback differently. And so you almost have to train everyone on everyone else's quirks. So you limit some of these issues because a lot of age discrimination claims have come up recently around these sort of oddities, so differences. So it's really a good point. Anyone else have anything that's kind of top of mind for them on this front? All right, well, I will, Stanny.
Oh, I was just going to mention that with the remote working being still something that companies are allowing, that brings up multi-jurisdictional issues. And so it's just something that people should be aware of. It depends on what you're talking about. Unfortunately, I had to manage some separations, and really it meant going through each state where each employee sits and making sure that the severance agreement was compliant with that state's laws. So the remote workforce idea does engender some more thinking with respect to multi-jurisdictional questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I know Lori's going to talk more about that in her presentation. But the one thing I am recommending if you do have hybrid work is in your offer letters, when you're onboarding people, get them to commit to where they live. And then they need to tell you when they move, because if they don't, that would be a grounds for termination. It would expose you to potential liability. You may not have moved their site to that new state, and you may now have obligations to comply there. So just really making sure, again, that you think through the different elements there and that you stick with it. And from a high level perspective, you know, California has one of the most employee friendly let's say jurisdiction, since we've used that word a lot. So a lot of separation agreements and clients as a best practice will leave in some of our language that talks about you're waiving any and all claims known and unknown that other states don't require, simply because it's a good reminder that when you sign this agreement, you can't sue us ever. So there's nothing wrong with keeping some California language in a non-California employees agreement just to be extra protective of the company. And, you know, leaves of absence and workers' comp claims have really taken an interesting turn, as we'll discuss, with working remotely, because people can't really claim they're tripping and falling at home, although that does happen. But the uptick in anxiety, ADHD, stress claims, all related to workers' comp, are just astronomical. So I don't know if any of you have experienced any of those, but those are something to think about, that if an employee goes on a leave of absence, or they mention that, oh, you know, this is what's going on, or I might need accommodation for this or that, you may have expanded obligations that are arising post-COVID with all of the stress and challenges that people experienced during that time that are still bleeding over. So good to stay open-minded to all the potential ways that things could, you know, come up in the workplace. Anything else here that you're thinking about that you want us to cover other than what we've prepared? All right, so we have another question about what's affected. So we talked about lawsuits, but where do you spend a lot of your time on the HR side? So give us a quick answer there to think through kind of what issues are coming up most often for you.
Crystal, for this one, I think we only asked them to pick one. So
Yeah, you get to pick your best one, your most one, your highest percentage of one that you or your clients are dealing with most often. And understanding that you probably have to deal with a lot of these things, but hopefully once you make good choices up front, some of them will be reduced in your stress level.
okay, closing the poll in 3 seconds. So get those answers in. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, ending the poll and sharing the results, Krista.
Performance manage it and positive culture. So again, it comes down to employee relations, because all these other issues, you're right, they're one-offs, they might not be every day. And if you make good choices up front, you have limited risk, but that ongoing performance management and really making sure your people are happy, that is the best way to spend money and time. It also reduces your risk, increases retention, and employee turnover is one of the highest costs to your business or your clients' companies. So really thinking through how you keep people on board and engaged is really important. So that's great. Great to hear. All right. There were a few questions in the chat I want to answer. There have been some slight changes on enforcing NDAs, but nothing crazily dramatic. But Lori may be in a better position to answer some of those questions to tag there. And Kevin, thank you for your thoughts. There have been changes, but not necessarily on kind of, you know, necessarily what you can enforce, but how you can enforce it, I think is a good way to maybe put that out there. All right. So again, just thinking through these things, this is not always the first place that CFOs put their time, but again, if HR is under you and you're managing cost and budget, considering what everyone just said, that your top issues are performance management and company culture. When a budget item comes to you from HR and they want training and they want extra resources to make life easier for your workers, and they want this resource to be added to your medical benefits, but it's going to cost something. I just want you to think about those added costs and what those benefits could add in terms of ROIs in other ways that you might not be thinking through. So really thinking about a brown bag once a month with your HR consultant or employment counsel or some other trainer that comes in, right there, you've created a connected opportunity where people get to talk, they get to share, they feel like they're part of a team, you get to set the tone, you have leadership show up and have a top-down approach to the way to lead, the way to engage. All of that you might think is fluff and extra money, and if you don't have it, you don't have it. But if you have it, most people across generations, when they ask you what's most important in their job, they will not say money is number one important. They will say team, growth opportunities, feeling connected to my work, feeling connected to a community. They want to learn, they want to grow. Yes, money is important, but it's usually third. Last time I looked at the Gallup survey on employee retention and happiness, it's third, that money that they look at. So really thinking about those other factors that you offer. What benefits are you offering? How often are your managers connecting with people? How often are they offering feedback, and in what type of productive ways? So really having an eye to some of these other soft skills that people haven't necessarily thought through is important. And I don't know about how it is in your industry, but in law, partners get made because they're good lawyers and they have a good book of business, not because they're a good manager. So think about how many people in your company are elevated because they're good at substantively what they do and not necessarily natural managers. So it might be worth your while to really think through that, especially if you have a younger management team that isn't as experienced, to put some time and effort and eye toward those type of things. That'll be a really great benefit to you long term. So how do most of you in a hybrid environment manage staying connected? Anyone want to share some good strategies that they've used? We're here to learn from each other. Come on, be brave, share. Or are you not doing anything interesting? Come on, you got to be doing good stuff.
I can throw something out there.
Thank you, Ryan.
Sure. So we would have weekly tactical meetings where, every Monday we'd all get together on a call, and we had a geographically dispersed team. And so it's a good way to kind of air out issues, make sure people are on the same page, and at least have at least one physical touch point where everybody felt like they were on the same team.
Yeah, that's great. How often, how many of you meet weekly with your teams? Yeah, how many meet more often than weekly? We're at twice a week. And then I meet one-on-one with everyone. Ryan, you got your hand raised. I see you there. You want to unmute?
We actually have a hybrid working policy. So actually, I meet my team 3 days a week.
And you do a Zoom call, or are you meeting in person as well, or how do
Oh,
you?
in person, we all come into the office.
Oh, that's
So,
great. And
yeah.
what's the topic and the focus of your meetings?
Typically just catching up on the projects and check in to see, if there's any concerns, what's the progress of the project, and also for folks that are out of states, because we have employee all over the US, we fly everybody in every quarter, and we do like a full week of like events, like bars, restaurants, like activities. So. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. Ali, did you have a share as well?
Oh, sure. Our workforce is almost completely remote. And in addition to regular staff check-ins and division check-ins, our what we're calling our fun committee has really been busy lately. And as we onboard a new person, we do a special half-hour dedicated to that person with a slideshow and trivia questions about them. And it kind of gets everyone engaged and connecting. And it's a really impressive way to get to know everyone. So
That's
a
wonderful.
lot of fun. If you want more information about that, I'd be happy to share.
Yeah, and when we're in our breakouts, we can share these types of things, but just think about how often are you connecting with your team? How often are you having one-on-ones? I was at a seminar once that said, I met with the leader said they met with their team members once a week and they asked them 3 questions. Give me an update of what's going on. What do you need from me to do your job better this week? What's one challenge I can help you with? And there was some other question, like just a personal question, just to connect. And he said that his turnover reduced some crazy number because he was talking to people every week. So no one felt the need to really just quit out of the blue because they felt ignored or annoyed. They talked to him if they were annoyed because he asked them these questions and had this open door communication where he could really think through it. So just encouraging your teams to do that. And if your teams are not natural at this, you can go to HR or go to one of your leaders that is more adept at the people side, and they can give you strategies and ideas on how to do that. So just something to really think about when you're trying to create culture and performance management, open, honest feedback. And I will tell you, you don't want anyone coming into a termination meeting surprised. So if you have a team that has a hard time with confrontation or any sort of feedback, give them a little seminar on that, because you really want to do it in the moment at the time. So then when that termination time comes, it's a really easy way to say, hey, we hired you for this, you didn't do this, we talked to you multiple times, and this just isn't working out. So this is the outcome. So really, that documentation and communication is really important. All right, any questions or other thoughts there? All right, so we're gonna just kind of breeze through some of the other issues. So I want to just bring this up as a huge hot button issue that you all need to know about. The wage and hour claims are still the #1 disputes and issues that we see come through the door. So if you aren't looking at how you pay people on a yearly basis, it's a mistake, because the California laws are changing so frequently about who can be a contractor and who can be an employee and who should be. And then once you're in the employment realm, who needs to be paid by the hour, which California says everyone, unless you fall under certain exemptions. So if you have a workforce that is paying 80% plus of your workforce a salary, you probably have an issue, okay? Because there are very few companies where every single worker can be paid a salary. So I just really want you to think about that over the last 10 to 15 years, the laws have significantly changed on who can be paid a salary and thereby exempt from overtime, meal periods, rest break laws. So the biggest cases that we get in are around these issues, and they're no longer single plaintiff cases. They will always be cases filed on a class basis where that individual is trying to represent an entire group of people in a similarly situated position, or the PAGA claims. How many of you have heard of PAGA, the Private Attorney General Act? Okay. So that's been a huge bane of California's existence. It's essentially what I like to call the fake class action, where individuals can be anointed by the state for no apparent reason to go and right or wrong on behalf of a group of people. There has been recent reform, which has been helpful, but it has not eliminated this action. And it's a really easy, low bar, even with the reform, for employees to come and try to remedy issues on a larger basis than just themselves. So again, we can't get into a whole PAGA class action wage and hour seminar today, but this is something that you should just really have an eye to and make sure that you think through. There are some obvious people who can be paid a salary, certain professionals, C-suite, and there are obvious people who should not. Usually all the assistants, interns, people that are lower level without, credentialing. And then there's that nice gray area in the middle. So just really think through all those issues before you make assumptions that because at your last firm or company, they paid this way, you can do it here. Always assume the last company did it wrong and look into it and make sure that you're clear and feeling confident in the decision that you make. And just as a side note, since all of you possibly deal with the CPAs and your teams, if you get anything from the government asking for employee records or any records, don't just turn them over. Please call your lawyer before you do that, because CPAs always tend to give way too much information, like triple what a lawyer would have given. So just make sure you go to your lawyer first before you produce anything with regard to a government document. And then that's it. Okay, we talked about the non-compete and non-solicitation agreements. So really just think through, what do you need to protect? How do you need to protect it? What policies do you put in place around those things? And training managers how to deal with those issues as well. Really making sure also that you're thinking through access and tracking, etc. And remember, your IT companies can always look at what everyone does on their computer, what they do on their phones, if they're work-related devices and work-related email accounts. So all those policies should also be reflected in your handbook, so no one can claim, what a minute, you can't get into my email. Of course I can get into your email. Big Brother is always watching. So make sure the policies support you. The other big issues that have coming up are leaves of absence. These are probably the most expensive harassment, discrimination, failure to accommodate claims, and they're on the rise. And so, like I said, huge claims around stress leaves, work environments creating stress in people, in addition to typical leaves around just pregnancy, medical issues, other issues covered under the ADA for which people need leaves. So make sure that you know all of your alphabet soup here and that you think through the different laws that are applicable or not, depending on the person's eligibility, the size of your company, and how long they've been with the firm. And make sure that you're always engaging in that communication and that interactive process. So don't assume that just because someone says they need this, that you just do it. Request the medical note, see what the doctors say, and all of that. Now, again, you don't need to be experts on this, but just remember, you have to tell HR and get expert advice on this, because these can be some of the biggest, most expensive claims if you don't do this right. So again, you just want your teams to be issue spotting, and you want them to alert you when anything comes up like that. And, other claim reduction strategies. We've talked about a lot of these things, but I really think the biggest one is to be clear in your communication with people about when they're succeeding and not succeeding. One of the first issues that will come up when you fire someone is they're going to say, you didn't train me. You didn't tell me I was doing anything wrong. You gave me no feedback. You essentially set me up to fail. And therefore, you didn't really fire me over a performance issue. You fired me because I'm a woman or over 40 or gay or purple or 7 feet tall. So just remember that really treating people in a fair and honest way, having those difficult conversations, documenting appropriately is going to be really important. And the reason I bring this up, especially to all of you, not only do you probably manage teams, but you probably manage the insurance and the risk for your companies and clients. And look at all your insurances. Do you have employment practices liability insurance if you were to get sued for discrimination or harassment? Most likely the wage and hour claims we talked about on pay issues are not going to be covered under those policies. There may be some coverage for attorney's fees, but not the substantive meat of what you or your client might have to pay. So think about what insurance you have and think about, is it cheaper to pay someone a severance on the way out than to get sued? So a lot of clients will say, I'm never going to pay anyone a severance. They don't deserve it. They were a terrible worker. Take that emotion out of it and think about it as an insurance policy. And does it make sense to have that insurance policy in place there? So typically a fair and comprehensive separation agreement will prevent that person from coming back and will be your best way to move on from a difficult situation. Okay. And I just always recommend, don't be afraid to call HR or your attorney. Most of the time when you give us a fact pattern, we will see all of the potentials that will come out of that situation that you might not see. So I'll say, oh, they're setting you up for this. This is what they're doing. So you need to fire them now because they're going to give you a note in 3 days. And I hate to be right, but I'm usually right. So call your lawyer, call your HR people, and really be overly communicative when your spidey sense goes off, because there's probably something going on there that you need to manage too. Okay. And then again, set up just easy yearly compliance, yearly updating of policies and agreements and handbooks. And again, really holding people accountable. A lot of times someone will call and tell me about this terrible employee that's suing them, and they'll say all the bad things. And I'll say, well, how long have they been with you? 5 years. And I'm like, when did the performance go downhill? Hoping they'll say like 3 months ago. And it's always like 4 years ago. And I'm like, why did you keep them with you for so long? And again, it's because at our heart, people are conflict averse and fear-based. So it sucks to fire people. I remembered the first time I had to fire someone, I went in the bathroom and I cried. And I do this for a living. So it is not easy to do. So remember, when you have some mid-level 29-year-old that you go tell to fire someone and they've never done it before, that's going to be really stressful for them. So really making sure that you give your management team all the tools they need to be successful, that you use the resources at your fingertips, and that you really set everyone up for success will be a great ounce of prevention.
Krista, can I add something?
Yeah, of course, Danny.
I was just going to say that I was going to add that these are not skills that come naturally to people. So you touched on that. Like, it's really difficult to have those difficult conversations. So I think that's why it's great to see all these bullet points about what you should be thinking through, and the regular check-ins. And again, documentation goes a long way. And one thing that I like to sort of try to frame it for people so that they understand is, look at what you have objectively and how that looks, right? Like, and Krista touched on this, like taking the emotion out, and you might have a difficult employee and it's been going on for years. But when you step aside, like, what does, do you have emails? What does everything look like objectively? Because that's the evidence, right? So if someone hires a really good plaintiff's attorney, that's what you're up against. So that's sort of the position that you need to kind of take and kind of be able to see through that lens. And really taking the emotion out is so important. So consulting with a lawyer, that's why, that's what we do. So.
And I'll say that people get overwhelmed by documentation. Documentation can be as easy as you have a walk and talk with an employee, you talk to them about their sales numbers and how they're low, and you say, you know what, I'd really love to see these up. We need to get to this level. We're happy to help you this, that, and the other. After that walk and talk, you go send them an email saying, hey, it was so nice to chat with you today. As we discussed, you're going to work on X, Y, and Z. I'm going to follow up with you in a month. Let me know if I can do anything to help. Right there is documentation, right? Or you send an email to HR telling them about the conversation that you had, or you put it in a manager's log, or you just send a note to the file. You don't necessarily have to write up some big old thing that you have an employee sign, right? So just thinking through any sort of contemporaneous record that shares about what you've done to communicate with the person is going to be important. All right, we have our next question for you to answer. So I sort of gave you some hints here. So if you're paying attention, you're going to pass the test. But what do you think are the issues that are the most expensive for companies? If you had to pick.
And Krista and I were talking when I first put this into the polling question, instead of expensive, I put explosive.
And I said, it could be both. So that's
both.
fairly accurate.
That was funny. All right, let's give it another 5 seconds, guys. So closing the poll.
I'll give you 2 answers based on current data, but it'll all depend. Lawyers love that. That's our favorite phrase. It depends. Don't get mad at your lawyer when they say that.
Okay. I'm going to close the poll now. So end in the poll, and Krista share the results.
All right. So wage and hour concerns are probably number 1 right now. And I would say the next most expensive are the leaves of absence. But I will say this about performance management. People that you fire will go into the lawyer's office and they will say, this happened to me and I was harassed and I was discriminated against and they treated me poorly and blah, 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 blah. And the lawyer most of the time is going to say, nah, I don't like that story. That doesn't seem right. You're not going to win on that, but give me your wage records. I want to see all of your time records and your commission agreements and how you were paid. And did you get your meal breaks and rest periods? And so they will have walked into that office thinking you discriminated against them because of whatever story and trauma from their childhood that they live their life in. And they are going to sue you on a wage and hour class action. So that is why it is so important that you get that part right, because most of the time when I talk to my plaintiff's attorney friends, people walk in bitching about whatever, and they walk out with a wage and hour issue, right? Because that's a black and white, did you give the break or not? Did you pay the commission or not? Did you properly classify them as salaried versus hourly? So just make sure that you really get those basics right and that you have all the documentation, especially for your hourly workforce, because that's always going to be the default. A lawyer can always find something wrong with those records typically. So I know I'm the fear part of the night, so hopefully you're not too scared. But that's why I have to have a cheery disposition, so you don't hate us, because we are the funnels of all of your stress. That's why you love calling your lawyers. All right, so just to reiterate, these are some of the things you should think about, keeping up with all of these things, making sure you have policies, and just being aware that, again, whether it's your team, your company, or overseeing HR, all the things that should be in a compliance regimen on the employment side. All right. I think I got it under my time too. So any questions that were ruminating in your mind as we're going through all this? I know it's a short time period to cover a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has something that's top of mind.
Hey, Krista, I just wanted to jump in here because I'm going to talk about applicable law. Can you clarify for employment matters, especially because we have all these remote workers, is it the case that the law where the employee works or where they live applies? Like, is there a general rule?
95% of the time, that's true. So all those choice of law provisions in all of this, agreements that you put out there may or may not be true. Now, I'll say this. A lot of states that aren't as employee friendly may let you enforce a choice of law provision for another state. However, California, if you have employees all over the country, they will likely, say that you either have to enforce where the employee sits, even if you're in, like, say your employee's sitting in California, but you're a, Texas company, which isn't as friendly to employees. They will say you will have to enforce where the person sits. Now, it can be of your benefit in a remote work environment where you have employees in West Virginia or Mississippi or other places that aren't as liberal in their employment policies. But then you as a company have a lot of clients that they don't like those rules. They want to be nice to their workers. So then they will play to the more generous states like New York and California. So that's also something to think about, that you can always give more to people, but you just can't give less. So whenever there's a conflict of law or a provision where it errs on your benefit or the employee's benefit, most courts, especially California, will expect you to err to the employee's benefit. Does that answer the question, Lori? Okay. Anything else? Well, I know that was a lot to digest, so I'm happy to answer any questions throughout, but Sandy, anything else to add on this segment?
No.
All right.
Krista. That was great. And again, we're going to be sharing the slides with everybody, and then a video of this if people need to catch up on all the different things that we're running through. Okay. So next on the agenda is the first breakout group for the case studies. So hopefully you guys have the PDF from the emails that we sent earlier. If you haven't gotten it, I put in the chat a link to grab that, and I'm going to just screen share the page that we're looking at. We're kind of going out of order since Krista went with her employment stuff first. So if you have your case studies, go to the second page, and we're going to be doing case study C and case study D in our breakout groups. So we're going to break out into 4 different groups. Groups 1 and 2 are going to do case study C, and groups 3 and 4 are going to do case study D. And when you get in your groups, you're going to have to kind of get organized pretty quickly. One of our panelists are going to be in there with you to help you get organized, but they're just going to listen in. They can't really, especially you, Krista, don't give them too many tips, right? For your group. So we're going to go in for, let's see, 20 minutes. So what does that make it? So right around a little after 5:30, we'll bring you guys back. So talk through your question, pick somebody to report out to the group, and then Kent will moderate a discussion to get everybody's input. So any questions?
Yeah, I might have missed this. How do we know which breakout groups we are in?
Yeah, when you go into the breakout group, it'll say the number. So, you're going into breakout group 1 or breakout group 2. Let me stop sharing, and I can put up the slide that shows that. Give me 1 second here. So it kind of looks like this. So look for this little kind of button. Before you join your breakout group, you'll see the breakout room number, and that is the group that you're in.
And so right now, just to reiterate, just that we're doing questions
C and D.
Yep, got it.
C and D, yeah, because we got to do Lori's stuff before we do A and B. So we're kind of moving around. Okay, so I will bring everybody back then, since we talked a little bit, like 5:35. So hope everybody had an interesting discussion. Kent is going to lead us through, I guess, everybody's observations and their answers to the questions. So I'm going to pull up case study C, and that is groups 1 and 2. All right.
Yep. Group 1, who was your leader? And if you can share the perspectives from the group, that would be fantastic.
So I think in our group 1, I think Colin, did you take our notes? And of course,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
if you want to just kind of give an overview, and then anyone else can jump in, please. I'll jump in too.
Yeah, I'm just gonna look at my notes here real quick. In terms of the first question, how should she go about assessing whether it's appropriate to pay everyone? I mean, it kind of alludes to in the answer that she realized that not everyone can be paid a salary, particularly junior people. So I think it's pretty clear that there is an issue overall, and so what we talked about was you go to your in-house counsel first and involve legal counsel as a starting point to raise the issue and start to assess it. If you didn't have in-house counsel, probably seek outside counsel, and your in-house counsel may want to get a specialist who specializes in employment law to help assess this. And then, knowing that there probably is an issue, you can start the work on figuring out how to solve it at that point, and gathering job descriptions if you don't have them, payment bans. We talked about some different best practices that companies should have in place that probably this company didn't have in place, but things you need to start developing in order to identify if people were exempt or non-exempt according with the state rules. In terms of the risks, Obviously there's a risk that we talked about earlier that you can get sued if you're not following the correct wage and salary rules. And so that's an obvious risk to the company. But we also talked about how they could go about fixing it. And, you probably have some employees that are happy and want to just, help you fix the problem, and other ones that could be disgruntled. And so we talked about some different strategies. Obviously things you need to figure out with your legal counsel, but how best to address this. There could be some morale issues if you're taking people off salaried and changing them to hourly, and other issues like that. So having to manage very carefully through that to try to minimize your risk. Someone had a good idea, and I don't know if this would work or not with legal counsel, but if you have to be more transparent with employees and say, hey, we messed up, we want to make this right. Like, we're doing some sort of, one-time payment with an agreement not to, sue or something. So that's kind of the full transparency approach versus just going and fixing it going forward and seeing if somebody were to raise an issue. One other good point someone on the team brought up was that, other than the fundamental issue of just having people that are probably misclassified, the fact that the CPO doesn't know the rules and this was clearly been an oversight, kind of questioning their qualifications in that role. And, really thinking if they're the right person to be sitting in that seat as the company moves forward.
Colin, I'm so glad you got that, because I put that in as a subtle one. But the other issue is the CEO so close-minded that the CPO brought it up, but they couldn't make any change. So thinking about leadership open to changes, because I've had clients, literally the chief HR officer will come to me and say, my CEO won't listen to me, what do I do? So just understanding there are all these dynamics of what can be going on, and all of you might be in a difficult position that I don't envy.
Thank you, Colin.
Absolutely. All great points. All right. In the interest of time, let's move to James. You are our leader for group 2.
Thank you, Kent. So we talked about the same things that Colin had brought up. A few other items on the assessment. Yeah, we definitely talked to get the CPO involved, internal counsel if there's one, and then employment counsel who specializes in this type of or employment law. Working with the department heads to get job descriptions, standardize that across the company just to make sure that all of our current employees and any new hires and new titles go through the same process. As far as the risks, I've actually seen this in I've seen this issue not have to pay any fines, but I believe if you underpay employees in California, there's no concept of materiality. So if you underpay someone by a quarter, it can result in fines. I believe it was in the $1,100 per person or per instance range. Luckily, we never had to pay any of those. So that was a big thing that we harped on just to make sure that we got this right. And then as far as updating, so systems need to be updated to make sure we can track hours, make sure we can pay properly for overtime, double time, do calculations on commissions for the sales folks and others. If they did work overtime, commission pay gets adjusted for those overtime rates. And then also updating policies, especially break time policies, especially for hourly employees in California and other places. And again, just making sure that any new titles that get created go through the same rigorous process of determining which group are they in, exempt or not exempt, with support to show why they are in one or the other. And then last thing was going to be just whether or not there's a perceived stigma around being called hourly, taken away from salary and being called hourly. Is that a morale hit on that part? Even if they would be paid more as an hourly employee who works 10 hours a day, getting that 2 hours of overtime. Just working your way through that just to make sure that we're ahead of that, to make sure that employees don't feel like they're being demoted by being called hourly, even though they have their college degrees.
It's definitely a change management internally moment, just to make sure that you minimize the potential disruptions. And I think you're right. It's critical to roll out a essentially policy of if people are in this band and this is their function, then they're going to be salary. If they're in this function and with this type of role responsibility, then they're hourly, and deploying that consistently across the company. I think the teams, the groups hit on those points. Anything else, Krista, that you were looking to
No, I thought you got it. I will address one thing. So if pay is owed, you can't negotiate it under California law, but if pay is disputed, you can. So you have to really think about how you can resolve this. Most people who have misclassified, most companies can't go in and pay everyone everything they're owed if they made a mistake in the past. So you either go back and fix it all, you fix it on a case-by-case basis with separation agreements as you terminate people, or you're a little more strategic in how you go about it. But yeah, there's a lot of things to think about there and how you can remedy these types of issues.
Awesome. All right, let's move forward to case study D. Sandy, your group 1. Who is your spokesperson?
Group 3, sorry.
Group 3.
Oh,
Sorry.
We got cut off. I'm sorry. I started talking and then they didn't get to pick a spokesperson. So can someone volunteer?
Sure, I can. Sandy wrote me separately, but if someone else wants to join me, we can do it together too.
Great.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. I have no delay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the first 2 questions, we actually could have, I think the whole time we could have spoken about them. For the first question, can workers come back to the office full time after being hybrid for 2.5 years? Our discussion kind of came up with yes, we could bring them back. We discussed a notice period. We also discussed like how they were hired. If they were hired to be fully remote, that might need to have more of a change, more of a policy or a change in position. We also talked about COVID, obviously. And if like the policy wasn't changed during that period, it'd probably be easier to bring people back full time to the office. And then in terms of terminating workers, if they refuse to return to work, we agreed yes. But again, with the caveat of how they were hired and just kind of understanding if there's a notice period or the right way to go about it in terms of communication with them and so forth, especially if they're like taking care of children or something and you have to give them time to make that switch. For question number 3, the possible risks are essentially retaliation is the main risk that we came up with, especially if they termed her around the same time that she, right after she made the complaint. If they termed her for the PIP, the PIP. So that was the main risk there, is just being sued and going through that litigation. And then for the last question, how do you best practices to reduce the risk? Just in reviewing it, it wasn't clear how often Joni was working with HR. So just being kind of documenting and having a contact person with HR. And then we were trying to understand why HR wouldn't have provided the complaint to her, the manager. Possibly it's a larger company, it got missed. People also talked about maybe giving her an accommodation to stay at home longer to see if her work would perform. So essentially adjusting the PIP, whether that's at home or coming into the office, if that's the better option. But again, just coming down to communication probably within the departments, but also with the employee. So that's it.
Excellent. I guess for our council, anything additional you're looking to
Patty's our spokesperson for our group.
Yeah. So let me just say on the first question, we had similar response. Yes, obviously, we did indicate that, the company would need to be prepared for consequences. When you bring employees back full-time after being hybrid, you can lose, especially some of your, star employees. So we highlighted that. On the second question, same answer. Obviously, in an at-will state, we had discussions about the fact that you can terminate. Yes, you can terminate people for no reason, so long as there's no, discrimination involved. So we had quite a, hearty discussion about that. We had discussion about PIPs as well. Overall, with regards to that third question about the possible risks associated, we also highlighted the fact that it was very unusual that it was very obvious that there was a lack of communication between HR and the manager here, and that's not really best practice, right? We want to make sure that you're connected with HR in particular for situations involving your particular reports. And then overall on the best practices in terms of the movement, we talked about how you want to implement this process. We talked about communication being very, the key, communication in advance, making sure you have a proper plan set up with, details. It's a consistent communication across all teams and individuals. I mean, we had a discussion about how you need to assume that what you say to any individual or any group will be shared. It's just one of those things that you have to watch out for. So you have to make sure that the communication is consistent. You want to make sure that the plan and the communication style is consistent with the culture of your company. We also had an interesting discussion about exceptions, how to handle exceptions. Like if you have a star employee who absolutely, needs to be more remote than hybrid, that you can accommodate those, but you just have to be very careful. You have to be creative. And because, the key to success is making sure that no one really feels like they're being treated, kind of targeted or isolated, being treated a different way than anyone else. And in the communications with individuals, make sure that there's no, nothing that's of a personal nature. It has to be just consistent with the plan, that there's no personal attacks in that kind of communication.
Sure, makes sense. All right, excellent points addressed by all four groups. Thank you so much for this. It's I think it's very helpful just to as Krista mentioned previously, some of these are real life examples that the names of the innocent have been changed. But these are real events and things that everyone could be subject and exposed to. So it's good to get in this type of forum at least a perspective, I will say. So thank you so much for everyone's participation.
Thanks, Kent. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we're going to take a 5-minute break. So grab water, do what you need to do. And then when you come back, can everybody turn their camera on? We're going to take a quick group picture, do intro going. I think Lori needs to troubleshoot. Dave, do you mind doing your intro while the screen is up?
Sure. Happy to. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, no, we can hear you. We can probably see you on the slide, the side of the slide. If you don't mind being small.
No, I prefer it. I'm the CFO at a climate tech company called Camilo. And my journey here has been a long and winding one. Started out as at a hazardous waste remediation company as a chemist, and have evolved through to stints in management consulting, and was a co-founder at a financial services tech startup 25 years ago. And I drew the short straw among the co-founders to get the CFO seat, for which I was completely unqualified. But that has kind of launched me into this pathway. And since then, I've been CFO, COO roles at over about a dozen or so small founder-led companies, generally mission-driven. And one of the things that relates to me being here is I had an amazing outside counsel in Lori Sanders, at one of those companies, and she helped me keep my rear end and the company's rear end out of troubles countless number of times. She was a true business partner, and so I can't say enough about her specifically, but the value of a good CFO lawyer relationship is so critical. And many years ago, she mentioned that she was presenting on this boot camp, and I finally have gotten around to having the time to be able to participate. So I'm really excited to be doing that. And I don't know that I have any superpowers, but one thing I think having a lot of different experiences has given me is that I've seen just about everything at some point, and so that really helps. Krista mentioned the spidey sense that CFOs or anyone really in this kind of avenue needs to have, and we're fortunate in that we get to see most stuff. We have connections to almost all parts of the business are running through the financial side, and so knowing when to ask questions, you don't need to be an expert, but knowing enough to say, that seems kind of, I want to know more about an IP issue or a business nexus issue or employment issues. It's really important to be able to have the confidence to raise questions and bring in experts. And that's something that I think I do pretty well. So.
Great. Thanks, Dave. I forgot that you knew Lori. So that's, that was timely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Okay, you know what? Let's do one more. Nikolai, can we save you till next time, and can we do Rich? Just in the interest of time. So, Rich.
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Rich Weissman, working out of San Jose by way of Clark, New Jersey. I am a fractional CFO and technical accounting advisor for early stage startups for a company called Countsy, which you can see on my background. Work with a lot of different industries, a lot of different interesting startup companies, mostly with cash flow issues. I've got 3 superpowers I want to share with you. One is building flexible financial models. The other is ASC 606 and 842 revenue and lease accounting. And my last superpower is having a knack for getting along with really cranky executives.
Ah, that's a good one. That is a good one. Thank you, Rich.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so I think, Lori, we are ready for you if you have troubleshooted or troubleshot your
Josette, you were saying you wanted to do a photo?
Oh, thank you. Gosh,
Yep.
Okay, yeah, everybody turn on your camera. Yeah, it's already 6 o'clock. All right. Thank you, Kent, for keeping me honest there.
My pleasure.
All right, so if everybody can like wave, I'll take a quick snip. Give me 1 second. All right, keep waving. Let me get my snip in here. All right. Okay, thanks you guys. Okay, I think with that, Lori, you are up.
Okay, so Josette, would you mind screen sharing? I know you've got a lot going on, and it's another burden on you, but do you have that, or do you want me
to go
ahead?
I got it up here, so give me 1 second here.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. I've been doing this boot camp for many years, and this is a debacle of a night.
No, we got it. We got it. Just moving a couple things around, and we'll get through stuff. Let me. Where did it go?
Got it. That looks great. Yep.
All right.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.
Hang on 1 second, Lori. I just got to move something around because I've got tons of things here. Okay, got it. Okay.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. So my name's Lori Sanders. I'm a business transactional attorney at Fox Rothschild in San Francisco. So I help privately held companies, middle market from formation to exit. I started my career on the East Coast working with large publicly traded companies doing M&A, IPOs, financing. I've worked with startups. I've worked with everything in between. So a lot of experience on the business transactional side. Next slide, please.
And Lori, quick time check. Can you go to 6:30? It's a little bit
Yep.
less time, but if we can do that, we'll have time for the other case study. Sorry.
Yep. Got that on my radar there. So I want to divide this into two segments. The first part, we're going to talk about the role of the CFO legally within an organization. And the second part, we'll talk about the CFO and general legal matters. But I wanted to talk first about the role of the CFO or the finance professional within the organization, because there are legal duties that the CFO has. So to figure out what those duties are, and we'll describe them in a moment, but to figure out what they are, can you go to the next slide, please? Just for each of you, and you probably all know this, but to determine the specifics of your legal duties and how to describe them, you need to understand what your organization is. So, are you working for a corporation? Is it an LLC, limited partnership? And then what is your organization's state of incorporation? Because for a lot of the matters I'm going to discuss, the state of incorporation or formation, that state law governs the corporate governance, your duties, and a lot of the other matters related to the running of the organization. And then your title sometimes makes a difference in looking at what your duties are within the organization. There are statutory officers. Those could be the president and the secretary in Delaware, or the president, treasurer, and secretary in California. And those are statutory officers. They may have slightly different duties and obligations than the non-statutory ones if you're a controller, if you're not at that C-suite level. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of each state and what the distinction is, but I just wanted you to understand when you're thinking about your duties, or if the issue comes up, these are the factors we're going to look at. Next slide, please. Was there something before this? Okay, sorry. So next, so we're going to do a quick polling question here. We have a few here. So just to speak of corporations, who does the CFO of a corporation report to? So we're talking about a corporation, not an LLC or anything. We're talking basically about the CFO or the chief financial person within that corporation. Does that person report to the president, to the board of directors, to the chairperson, majority stockholders, or no one? Is the CFO kind of an independent role within the corporation?
Okay, Laura, let's give it another 5 seconds. So get those answers in, closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results.
President and the board, chairperson. Okay, excellent, great. Those are about the correct answers. So on the next slide, just to elaborate on this point, the answer is really, it depends. As Krista mentioned, that's our favorite legal answer when you ask a lawyer a question, it depends. Just a little bit of summary to remind you, I'm sure you all know this, but within a corporation, the stockholders elect the board sets the strategy and directs the operation, the board appoints the CEO or president, or CEO and president, oftentimes the secretary. But then, oftentimes the CEO president hires the CFO, but sometimes the board does. So it depends upon your organization. I think in the poll, it was pretty much correct. I generally see that the CFO might report to the president, but I often see that the CFO has a direct relationship with the board. So it does depend. Next question, or next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about what those duties are. Why did I set this all up? So I'm not talking about your job duties. When you're hired, you're going to, have a revenue function, you're going to have the cash flow function, and whatever the accounting functions are, whatever the functions of your position within the organization. What I'm talking about with duties are the fiduciary duties that personnel such as the CFO, VP Finance, senior level officers owe to the corporation and its stockholders. And the way we describe this in the law is very simple. We usually say that Your duty is to act in good faith in the best interests of the corporation and its stockholders using reasonable care. Now, there's slight variations on this wording depending upon the state and some of the roles, but that's typically the very core of the duties of an officer to the corporation. Act in good faith in the best interests of the corporation and all of its stockholders, not just certain stockholders, using the care that an ordinarily prudent person in the same position would use. Next slide, please. To understand those duties, I think it's good to say, well, how do you breach those duties? Just the contrast will show what your duties are. So the duty of care and loyalty is violated by some of these things that are very obvious, like if you misappropriate funds, if you don't administer the funds properly, if you misrepresent facts, if you are self-dealing. I think those are clear ways that you would understand that you're breaching a duty to the corporation. You're doing bad things, and you shouldn't do bad things, because not only is it a bad thing, but you're breaching your fiduciary duties to the corporation. Next slide, please. So a couple examples, I'm not going to get into details here, but the point I wanted to make for you as accounting professionals, it's similar for us, and I think Sandy can speak to this as well, that for legal professionals, it's never really clear cut because we're in a fast-moving organization, there's not enough time, there's a lot going on, you have outside pressures. So in each of these cases I'm going to show here, there's just two. It's clear that the CFO or the accounting officer did bad things. Like in this case, they didn't keep accurate financial records. They lied to the board. This guy tried to arrange a restructuring so that he would become CEO. You know, clearly this guy did bad stuff. But when you look back at the case, within the context of the organization that he was working in, it was a nonprofit, underfunded. The CEO was basically absent. I don't know where the board was. They were running out of money. You know, it's a desperate situation. So not to justify the breaches that this person was doing, but to understand that we're in context where there are fast-moving things that are happening. Maybe there's not oversight, not proper oversight. And, you know, the duties might not become so clear after a while. Next slide, please. This is just another example for you where the CFO and the accounting officer, so this was a lower level person, were both found to have breached their fiduciary duties. Again, they did a bunch of stuff wrong, and none of you are going to do this, of course. They were reimbursing for personal expenses. They were signing off on financial statements that they shouldn't have. Lots of bad stuff. But stepping back and looking at the context here, in this case, the CEO was a very dominant personality, and he was basically pressuring them constantly, saying, do this, record these expenses this way. This is the way it's supposed to be done. This is the way I want you to do it. Lots of pressure from the CEO. The board was looking only out for their interests, and they basically, at the end of the day, threw the CFO and the accounting officer under the bus and just blamed them and didn't take any responsibility. So again, I think there's a context here that we operate in that, we have to be cognizant of what our duties are within the organization, understanding there's all these pressures that we are going through as professionals that may influence how we act.
Lori, can I add something here?
Sure.
And this kind of goes back to what I had mentioned at the outset, and Kent also mentioned this, just the importance of a good relationship between the general counsel and the CFO. So if any of you, and hopefully you won't be in this situation, but if you feel like you're being pressured, the natural inclination, if you have a good relationship with the GC, is to maybe talk to the GC. One thing that you should keep in mind is that the GC is always, the GC's duties are to the company. So that's where it gets a little tricky, and so it depends on your relationship with the GC. But if you are in this kind of situation, it's advisable to actually consult with, your own legal counsel at that point. But depending on your relationship with your GC, you might want to, discuss but just keep in mind that the GC's obligations are to the company.
Right, right. And I think in this case, it'd be appropriate to go to the GC and say, look, we both need to look out for the corporation. Here are some actions that are not in the best interest of the corporation. So what can we do in our role as officers and employees to remedy this? You know, should we go to the board? Are there other things that we can do to act to right the situation for the benefit of the corporation? Next slide, please. So polling question number 5. Does the CFO or the VP finance or controller or any other accounting person, do you have personal liability for any debts or obligations of the organization? Meaning, is your checking account at risk for debts or obligations of your employer, corporation, or LLC?
Let's give it another 5 seconds, Laurie. So closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the poll and sharing the results.
Ooh, excellent, interesting. All right.
So mostly no.
Yes, mostly no. Well, let's go to the next slide then.
Exactly.
Well, there is potentially personal liability. I just throw this in there because I always find that people are surprised to know that there may be some personal liability. Just to give the first bullet point as an example, if you in your organization, no matter what your title is, if your role is to ensure that payroll tax in California, payroll taxes are remitted to the state in a timely manner, and they are not, the state can potentially come after you personally. So there are certain things that you may, in your role, notwithstanding your title, you may not even be the CFO, you can be an accounts payable clerk, and you may have some potential personal liability. So bottom line here, again, when there's a stress on the corporation, maybe there's not enough money, the corporation or the LLC decides to stop, or delay making certain payments, you need to step back and make sure that things are done correctly, and consult with your GC and see what the larger organizational remedy could be to that situation. Edward, what's your comment there?
Oh, just that I work for a bank, and I know that as a CFO of a small bank, I was, could have been liable for BSA, anti-money laundering issues that could have come up that might have been my issue. Personal.
Yeah, and those of you who sign off on public filings, 10Ks, 8Ks, there's certain liability there as well. That's right. So finally, on this point, I just wanted to say, I know none of you are going to do anything wrong, but say you're included in a lawsuit and there's some allegation against the corporation and its officers that something's been done wrong. Maybe there was a financing, there was an IPO, and it goes awry. Usually under most law, most organizations, as an officer, and even as not necessarily a C-suite, but some of the subsidiary positions, I would call it, you will have a right to indemnification from the entity. And you can find that right in these documents that I reference here. Of course, being indemnified depends upon the company actually having the funds to mount your defense and to pay you for the costs that you incur in defending yourself against the lawsuit. But you have a right to indemnification, except in the next slide, there's a few things that you can't be indemnified for. So again, we know you're not going to do bad things and you're not going to breach your duty by acting in bad faith. But if you do something in the workplace that's a personal tort, you're sitting in your office, not you, maybe your employee in your accounting group is sitting in the office and they, send out a defamatory email, or there's some sexual harassment, that's not going to be indemnified by the corporation. Next slide, please. So let's get into the next segment. I want to talk about the bigger legal matters. So as your organization's finance person, what legal matters do you encounter most? And we put employment. Employment, I think, is the biggest. But for you, what have you encountered most in your role with your organization?
And pick just one, right, Lori?
Yeah, or if there's something else, you can describe it in the chat. We just put some broad categories. For example, I didn't put litigation here because litigation usually arises out of employment or arises out of breach of contract or, you know, whatever. So yeah, if you have another matter that you encounter, just go ahead and put it in the chat.
Let's give it 5 more seconds. So closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the poll and sharing the results.
Okay, employment, contracts, intellectual property, securities, and fund. Yeah, that's about consistent. I did look up some statistics very informally on Google last night, and I think what I saw was the #1 source of litigation and legal matters, contracts, breach of contracts, employment matters, securities, fundraising. I don't know about IP and governance, but interesting. So this goes to the point that Sandy just mentioned. If you have in-house legal counsel, just a reminder, there's no attorney-client privilege. So if you yourself feel you've done something wrong or you want personal advice, you know, if you call up Sandy, she can't give you attorney-client privilege advice. And same with me. If you have a relationship with me, you know, I talk to Dave Riley all the time. He never did anything wrong, but if he had called me and said he's done something, you know, personally, he's got a concern about something he's done for which he might have personal liability or there's a personal recourse, I would not be able to advise him personally. There would not be attorney-client privilege. He would have to go out and get his own attorney. So what we're going to do here is we can't give you, as we mentioned in the first segment, we can't give you the overall of all, you know, law in 15 minutes. So the 2 points that we're going to go through are, we're going to give you some issue spotting, which Sandy mentioned at the very outset. And when you spot an issue, you need to reach out to the appropriate advisor, you know, in-house legal counsel, external counsel. The one thing I would say, though, is be sure and find the external counsel or in-house counsel who knows the subject matter. For example, if there's a securities law issue, you know, your patent attorney is probably not going to be the best person to advise you. So find the right professional to advise you. So contracts is a big issue, lots of things, but I will say this, when clients call me and they have some sort of contract matter, the vendor has not delivered, the implementation has not happened in a timely manner, you know, somebody has not paid, what I'm going to ask are really 3 things. Do you have a copy of a signed written contract? What is the governing law? And how are disputes resolved? I don't even really want to know the business terms because without a signed written contract, we move into the area of, well, is there a binding contract? What are the terms? If the governing law is, I had one recently where my client called up and the governing law of the contract was Georgia. We found a Georgia attorney to advise them because I think they were going to go into dispute resolution on that. So the first thing is contracts need to be complete, signed, proper parties and everything. And I think this is really important, and Sandy can weigh in here as well, but contract maintenance and keeping up is often parked. If you don't have a really good in-house legal department or a fulsome legal department, this function is parked under the accounting function. So, you know, you want to make sure that you keep those contracts up to date, fully signed, and so on.
I did want to add, you know, I like your bullet point about correct parties, because in the case of a company that's making an acquisition or several acquisitions, what happens is that sometimes there are some contracts where there's some cleanup that's necessary or terms that, you know, are not standard in the acquiring company, like just things that you need to reconcile. And then also what I've encountered is just the parent affiliate issue where maybe there's an SOW for some work, and at the SOW level, it's one party, and then but the entity that's paying is another because the parent company is going to be paying. And I know that that kind of trips up the accounting sometimes internally. So it's not to say that that arrangement is not okay, but you want to make sure that the contract is tracking all the relevant parties very clearly. And the same for like name changes. And, you know, in our climate these days, there's so many different acquisitions, and it's a really easy amendment that you can do. But to Lori's point, you need to have a good team, whether it's your legal or accounting, that is really staying on top of these contracts and making sure that it's capturing any essential changes.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Next slide, please. Another, as you all indicated in the poll, another big issue is securities. Again, I can't teach you securities law, and a lot of you know it already. I can tell, you know, you've been in large organizations and have gone through offerings and other transactions. But I do want to just emphasize here, you as accounting professionals are often keeping, you know, stockholders' equity, the cap table, you're keeping track of debt, convertible debt. So there's a great deal of overlap between accounting and legal. So what the take home here is, if anyone in your organization talks about a security and there's going to be an offer, a promise, an issuance, a sale of a security, stop and get legal counsel. And let me talk about what a security is. A security is any of these things I list: stock, shares, options, warrants, notes, safes, RSUs, sometimes LLC interests, you know, crypto. Anytime you're thinking as an organization that you're going to do anything with those things that are called securities, stop and talk to counsel, because there's securities laws and the penalties for not complying are pretty severe. Sometimes the purchaser can rescind the whole transaction, and that can happen way after the transaction is closed. So I wanted you to recognize what a security is and what you need to do. Again, issue spotting here. Next slide, please. Just very briefly on privacy laws, data privacy. This is a huge area of law right now, and it's fast moving. I can't even begin to summarize it. We actually just had a seminar within my firm with the head of our privacy group. She says it changes on a daily basis. I think last year when I did boot camp, there were 12 states with their own privacy laws. Now there's 18. Some states have biometric privacy laws. Some states have other things. It is a very complex area, and this is really an area of specialization, but it is something that comes up a lot more and is just, again, issue spotting and bringing in the right expertise. Next slide, please. Cybersecurity, let's skip over that one for the interest of time. Okay, polling question number 7. So just as a, again, looking at some of the big lawsuits, or just not big lawsuits, but the pesky lawsuits that happen nowadays against organizations. In 2023, how many lawsuits were brought in federal court and in New York and California state courts alleging that websites were not accessible, meaning that if a person with some sort of disability or handicap would go onto the website and there's any kind of interactive functionality, they could not use it. They couldn't see the photos. They couldn't look at the product. They couldn't submit the form to request information. So any guesses as to how many lawsuits were actually filed?
So closing the poll in 3 seconds. So 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. And sharing the results, Lori.
Ah, pretty good, pretty good. I think I probably set that one up so you all figured it out. You want to go to the next slide there? And give us the answers. So yeah, they're about 4,600, but that was lawsuits, and the demand letters probably vastly exceeded that. So this was just something I threw out there as far as pesky legal issues to keep in mind in your organization, that there are a lot of these accessibility lawsuits, and you should have some, if you haven't done it already, you should have all of your websites, and it's going to move into mobile and SaaS products as well eventually, probably in the next few years, not maybe the next 2 or 3 years, but eventually. So have those audited for accessibility and then fix them.
And just
Next
as a
slide,
side
please.
note, Lori, like, it's a great point. Like, I don't know, our clients get these probably monthly, and the minimum resolution value is usually about 10 grand. So they're looking to get 7 to 15 grand per lawsuit just from a demand letter without actually filing a lawsuit against you. So it's expensive, even though it's, you know, an easy fix.
Yeah, and just settling the 10,000 claim doesn't satisfy, you know, across the board. You can get multiple claims, repetitive claims, so it is a pesky issue. Next slide, please. So just a couple more points on legal issues. Governance, this again often overlaps with the accounting function. Governance means how the corporation operates and approves actions. And the reason I bring this up is that there are often within either the documentation or agreements, there may be something that says, you corporation cannot spend more than $100,000 on CapEx without the consent of the majority venture capital investors. Or you organization can't incur debt more than XYZ without the consent of the members under the LLC operating agreement. And those provisions might be in contracts or agreements or charter documents, but you as the accounting function may not know it, right? So there has to be communication here. It goes a little bit to the contracts, but those might be found in the investor documents, for example. So understand when consents are needed for actions and whether you have to go through a specific consent process. Next slide, please. And I think on this was something that I guess Krista brought up earlier, which is insurance. And I do also see this is often in the accounting function more than the legal function. So insurance is super important. Again, this is where you need to be talking between accounting and legal, because contracts often have, or very often have, minimum insurance requirements, licensing agreements, distribution agreements. They'll say, you know, you need to maintain at least $1 million of general liability insurance, et cetera. And that may be something that the business people put in the contract or agree to, but it's not communicated to whoever is really keeping track of the insurance for the organization. Employment practices liability insurance. I know Krista mentioned earlier that insurance doesn't cover everything with respect to employment matters, but this is a really good one to have. And cyber liability is another really good one to have as well in this day and age. So that was it. It was very quick. Sorry, I had to go a little bit quickly through some of that, but happy to answer questions after this is done. But we just wanted to give you an overview. Again, it's issue spotting, understanding the interplay between legal issues and the accounting function, just so you can know when you need to pick up the phone and call the right person.
No, that's great. Thank you, Lori. Okay. And we have time then for our last case study. So the questions, so then we're going to page 1 of the case study summary. So case study A and B, and everybody is in their original groups from the first breakout. So Kent, what do you think? Should we go 15 minutes in the group and then try to wrap up from there?
I think that's perfect.
For each one, and then maybe what we can do is let's have the switch up the order. So the group that went last time, have them go first.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Are you? Yeah, you're going to group B.
So let's see. Let's go. Your group. We started with group 1 the last time. So
We start with. Well, do you want to switch up the case studies or the groups?
oh no, the groups. The groups. Yeah.
Okay, the groups. Okay.
Yeah.
So my group went second. Group 2, James is still our spokesperson, so I'll turn it over to James.
Thanks, Kent. So we talked about this. Luckily, we have not personally experienced this situation, but really, so after examining the facts, really, because Joni has only been there for 1 week, there's probably a lot of other items that she's not aware of yet. So after this conversation with the board member, talk to the CEO again and really say, I spoke with the board member, this is what was said. Present again to the CEO, here's our cash burn, here's the number. And this is what I think the cash burn looks like. And really then ask the CEO, is this how you see the numbers? And if the CEO says, yes, well, cash burn is bad, or whatever the reasons are, then there could be another opportunity for the CEO to go to the board and say, yes, we ran the numbers, or whatever it is, to say, yes, we're in danger of running out of cash, or whatever the situation is. But at least have that conversation first with the CEO, just to be sure that, as Joni, we're not missing any of the additional facts that may be in play. And then depending on how that works, how that conversation is, maybe speak with internal counsel. But again, having the numbers, having that objective set of numbers to bolster the fact pattern is going to be helpful.
Fully agree. Laurie, do you still have the same person as your spokesperson,
No.
or changed it up?
Anna is our spokesperson this time.
Excellent.
All right. Well, we discussed, that same first step is to go to the CEO and talk to them about it. Why didn't they share what there's a certain, there's a problem here. There's a certain fiduciary duty of the CFO. And then depending on their reaction, next steps would be maybe going to the board. And after all of those conversations, we also said that it might be a good idea to go to HR to kind of document the situation, because it is that's a very terrible position to be in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that that our group, the group 2, fleshed out was around the fact that she's only been there for a week. So very early in the relationship and trust building process with the CEO. So definitely speaking to the CEO first and not going behind his or her back is critical. And so, it's one of those things that you don't want to be seen as the Chicken Little of the sky is falling. But as both groups have pointed out, maybe there's something that Joni, being in role for only a week, is not aware of. Any other comments or questions or comments from group 1 or 2?
No, I think we had a similar thing just on that point. Joni may need to learn more information, but she can also bring to the table, someone mentioned, like, preparing some comparables to other companies in the same industry, to present neutral outside evidence to persuade or show the CEO to try and push this a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. All right, Josette, if you're ready to move to case study B.
Yep. Okay. So let's start with Krista's group.
Hi.
Excellent.
We can have Patty be the spokesperson again, or did someone else want to take the lead this time?
I'm happy to, unless someone wants to.
Great. Well, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Oh, so in this case, Joni is our CIO, and a client of ours paid a fraudulent invoice. Had our letterhead and everything. So obviously the first thing, we have to put our investigation hats on first, and first thing we'll do is ask the client to send a copy of the invoice and the email that was sent to them. And then we have to turn internal and ask our, were we hacked? So Joni has to ask us, were we hacked, and make inquiries of whether or not there was any involvement by any of our internal, some employee or, you know, a disgruntled outgoing employee, you know, understand if there's any liability on our part in any way. Is there insurance coverage that we can obtain for the loss in case we're not able to receive payment from the company since they don't want to double pay? And we talked about the possibility of having business insurance cover that. We also had a discussion about assessing our, you know, company's processes and our own safeguarding procedures. However, what did arise in this situation was a discussion about the fact that it was our clients' system of controls that failed here. And they should have seen perhaps a different bank account set up as the, the bank account to which the funds were going to be transferred, that they should have called us and verified with us that there had been a change of that sort. And so that was kind of disappointing fact that we all talked about. And, you know, we also talked about, you know, kind of other similar situations and whether there's a risk that AI may have played a role in this. So, you know, just to start the discussion, but we all agreed we would do the investigation first before making any judgments.
No, all great points. Makes sense. Anything else?
Anything else from my team?
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Greatly appreciated, Patty. Great job. Sandy?
So Rich is going to be your spokesperson this time.
Yeah, so we came to some similar conclusions. We thought that the responsibility might be shift a little bit if the representative, if the invoice came from a true representative of the company, but generally that the client really does have responsibility on their control side. Where did the invoice really come from? Did they recognize the email address? Did the bank account change? All that stuff. So similarly, we would do that investigation. We would ask for the invoice, the email, proof that they paid it, and ultimately from there go to think about any insurance coverage on either side. We talked about the Internet Crime Complaint Center and all of that. At the end of the day, regardless, you have an issue of whether even if it's not the company's fault, you have to think about the relationship with the customer. What is the value of this contract? What's the value of the long-term relationship? You might just decide to eat it. But either way, getting all that information and investigation would be the first step, and then insurance hopefully could cover some of it.
Yeah, all great points as well. That's yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head of both groups of just, you know, being collaborative and as you pointed out, evaluating the relationship and the prospective future business opportunities with this company. And if they don't have adequate coverage, maybe you split the baby and eat half of it and they eat half of it. But all great points. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So we've got just a couple minutes left. I wanted to ask a question. This had come up for the last session. So I know that, you know, we've talked a little bit about insurance and what is covered here with respect to, you know, some of the risks that have been talked about. Would it be helpful to have, you know, maybe a 1-hour Q&A session with somebody on the insurance side just to cover, you know, E&O, D&O, all of the employment stuff? We do a risk management session in our spring boot camp, but if folks might be interested in that, you know, raise your hand. We can probably schedule something over the next couple of weeks. If not, we can just keep going. But any interest?
Yep, I would like to hear about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All hands. Okay. Let's see what we can do there. Okay. So we are really right at time. Any questions for the speakers? Well, we got a couple minutes, and I guess just before that, I put in the chat one more time. If you guys can grab the survey link, take a few minutes after the session to give us some feedback. We want to continue to improve, and then we'll announce the winner of the Starbucks gift certificate next week. Craig, did we answer your question in the chat? Or was that like just kind of train of thought based on Lori's sequence? Is Craig there? Oh, there you
No,
are.
it was answered. I was thinking in terms of lawsuits, right? And that the CFO, if the CFO is knowingly acting in bad faith, they could be sued along with the company, correct?
Well, even if they're not, they can be sued. I mean, a plaintiff can name anybody and everybody in the lawsuit, right? So the question is, if you haven't been acting in bad faith, can you be indemnified to get out of the lawsuit? And one thing we have talked in past boot camps about D&O insurance. Again, maybe that's part of Josette. We can include that in the insurance program if we put one together. And we've gone into a little bit more detail of D&O insurance.
And we cover that in the spring, but I think, if there are questions that people have coming out of this session, since insurance was mentioned, we can probably, grab Matt from Aon. He had done a quick session and he grabbed his D&O guy, so let me talk to him and then we can schedule something and then just make it kind of a Q&A session. They can go through some of the basics and then any other questions that have come up as a result of what folks mentioned today could be useful. So I think with that, we got a minute left. Thank you so much to Lori and to Krista, to Sandy and Kent for moderating. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Hopefully the content was interesting and we will see everybody next week. Look for an email from us kind of through the week, through the end of this week and into next week. With respect
nice to meet you all. Feel free to reach out with any questions or find us on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
See you next week.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah.